Not to serve with honor, not to fight glory-soaked battles against Xenos or heretics, but to live within the endless metal arteries of a machine so vast that even its own crew never learns its full shape. There is a question whispered among the ranks, never spoken loudly, never admitted truly. What happens to a human soul when it spends its life entombed inside a star-born coffin the size of a continent? The Imperial Navy speaks of pride, of duty, of service. Propaganda tells its citizens that to set foot aboard a warship is to walk the path of legends. The hymns, the orators, the endless parades promise that these vessels are cathedrals of steel carrying the divine wrath of humanity's God Emperor. But those hymns fall silent the moment the massive void doors close behind a new recruit. Because that is when they learn the unspoken truth: a warship is not a sanctuary. A warship is a prison, a devouring beast, and a graveyard whose corpse count rises long before war ever comes. Life inside begins not with greeting, but with loss, the first loss being the simple concept of sky. Fresh air becomes a forgotten myth. Color becomes theoretical. The horizon, gone forever. Instead, the crew awaken to the same steel corridors, the same echoing footsteps, the same hymnal machine droning that shakes loose screws from ventilation grids like metallic rain. They breathe recycled air older than some regiments. They drink water filtered through mechanisms that have failed audits for centuries but are blessed and declared acceptable by frail scribes who know better than to report the truth. The crew learn quickly that the galaxy is not merely hostile. It is ancient, indifferent, and most of all, waiting. Waiting for the ship, its crew, and its purpose to fail. Newly assigned personnel arrive with hearts marching to the rhythm of patriotism. That rhythm does not survive the first night cycle. They are handed worn manuals written in ink faded by generations and told to memorize protocols that have been patched and rewritten more times than the ship's outer hull. Most discover that the decks they are assigned to have histories that make no sense, sealed rooms no one speaks of, access panels that are welded shut from the inside, and entire corridors marked on maps but non-existent when searched. Rumors speak of decks removed from official records, abandoned to silence but not to emptiness. The ship has secrets. Every warship does. To serve inside is to feel those secrets pressing in from the walls like a weight around the lungs. The first weeks are the breaking-in period, not for training, but for acceptance, the acceptance that there is no leaving. Warships do not return recruits. They return bodies, if fortunate. For most, the warship becomes the world. For others, it becomes the final world. A man may serve 30, 40, 60 years and never once set foot on soil again. Entire lives are lived beneath flickering lumens that never fully brighten, humming conduits that disrupt sleep patterns, and prayers delivered through speaker systems that crackle and distort as though something else listens through the wires. Chaos is spoken of as an enemy beyond the void, but those within the ship learn that madness does not come from demons clawing at the hull. It blooms naturally, like mold in damp vents. Isolation breeds its own horrors. The ship holds thousands, sometimes millions of souls, yet never has humanity felt so alone. Crew pass one another daily without names, without eye contact, without proof of existence beyond uniforms and orders. It is easier that way. To know someone is to mourn them later. This is not life romanticized, this is life rationed. Food arrives in allotted measures without explanation, taste, or memory. Sleep is permitted but never guaranteed. Dreams are discouraged. Dreams lead to questions. Questions lead to suspicion. And suspicion, within these steel walls, is a crime burned away by purifying flame. The commissariat ensures compliance, though some whisper that the ship itself does its own policing. A missing crewman behind a sealed grate is quietly explained as transferred. The sound of scraping in ventilation shafts after lights out becomes the wind, even though there is no wind in space. Faith is the only medicine allowed, not because it cures, but because it quiets. Above all, the people learn to fear silence more than alarms. Alarms can mean action, duty, survival. Silence means thinking. Silence means remembering Earth, or family, or anything beyond endless steel. Silence allows the realization that the voice chanting litanies through old speakers is not soothing, it is a reminder. A reminder that they must believe the Emperor watches, because no one else ever will. Every crew member keeps a quiet, buried answer to the question never asked aloud: what is life like inside an Imperial Navy warship? And the answer, whispered only in their final breaths, is this: life inside the warship is not living. It is enduring. And endurance is the only thing the Void has ever respected. Because the real toll of life aboard does not begin in battle, it begins in the quiet routines, the forgotten days, the sense that time itself behaves differently once sealed behind steel bulkheads. Keep watching until the end, because the truth about what happens to the minds and souls of those aboard is a reality most Imperial citizens never hear, and those who do seldom remain the same. To understand life inside such a vessel, you must first understand that names lose meaning here. Every crew member is issued a designation, rank, duty, deck, and responsibility. There are no surnames, no family histories. The past becomes contraband. New recruits cling to memories like illicit charms in their bedrolls, but memories rot quickly in the recycled air. Call someone by their old world name and you mark them as unadjusted, untrained, unbroken. No one wants to be seen as unbroken. The broken last longer. The ship provides everything a body needs to survive, but nothing a mind needs to remain whole. Relationships are discouraged. Friendships are risky. Bonds are liabilities. It's easier to lose someone you never dared to care about. On a ship where death might claim a dozen lives from a single malfunctioning bulkhead door, emotional attachments are seen the same way loose wiring is, a hazard waiting to spark. Camaraderie exists, but only in small, flickering doses, shared like stolen warmth in a drafty corridor. Two engineers exchanging nods over a successful repair. A mess hall chef quietly slipping an extra ration to a gaunt deckhand. A scribe sharing a forbidden joke between him announcements. These are the rebellions the commissariat cannot catch, the ones carved in silence and sealed behind the eyes. Yet what truly unnerves new recruits is the scale, not of the ship's monstrous size, but of its indifference. A warship doesn't care if you are tired. It doesn't care if your hands shake from lack of rest. It doesn't care if your thoughts wander to places the ecclesiarchy forbids. The ship demands. You comply. End of negotiation. Those who falter are transferred, a word spoken with a calmness that never reassures. Transferred could mean reassignment, or recycling, or something no manual bothers to mention. Most stop asking after the first disappearance. You may wonder, why stay? Why serve? Why accept a life traded for duty? For many, the question never came. The tithe demanded bodies and the forge worlds demanded labor. Some serve for the promise of pay, although veterans laugh dryly at that. Others out of fear. A rare few come chasing valor. None find what they expected. But this is where the illusion changes, because buried beneath the dread, the silence, the sacrifice, there is something else. A reason many endure longer than logic says they should. There is the moment, rare, electric, unforgettable, when the entire ship shudders under the ignition of its engines. When the decks tremble as if reality itself is being torn open. In that moment, every crew member understands. They are aboard one of the most powerful instruments of war the galaxy has ever conceived. They are part of something colossal, terrifying, divine. And when the ship breaks the void and the stars twist past like silver scars carved across eternity, some feel fear, but others feel wonder. For those who endure the claustrophobia, the rules, the silence, the absence of real sky, the reward is that fleeting moment where they witness what most humans never will, the raw, ancient, impossible beauty of the galaxy up close. And yet, even that has a price. Because wonder does not keep a soul sane forever. Because on an Imperial Navy warship, sleep is not a right, it is a ration, and like all rations aboard the ship, it is rarely enough. The vessel breathes with machinery, It pulses with power lines, it grinds and growls with ancient engines that should have been replaced thousands of years ago, but are instead worshipped as relics. The ship does not slumber, and neither do you. Life aboard is dictated by cycles, but not the day and night of a planetary sky. There is no sunrise on metal. There is no nightfall in the void. Instead, alarms signal when the crew must wake. Hymns signal when they must pray. Vox commands signal when they must eat, work, stand, kneel, or remain absolutely still and silent. The concept of personal time evaporates quickly, like vapor near a plasma coil. Biological needs are scheduled, not requested. Thousands of crew share facilities built for hundreds. Hygiene becomes less a practice and more a theory, one promised in manuals, never delivered in corridors. The recycled air smells faintly of oil, sweat, and ancient incense. New recruits cough for weeks until their lungs adapt, or fail, whichever comes first. And yet, what truly makes rest impossible is the sound. A constant, droning, rhythmic metallic heartbeat that echoes through every pipe, railing, and vent. At first, the noise is maddening, a relentless assault that follows you through your tasks and haunts you in the rare seconds your eyes close. But eventually, something unsettling happens. Recruits no longer hear it. Their minds simply filter it out. Silence becomes foreign, quiet becomes terrifying, and then comes the first nightmare, not born from imagination, but from memory. The warship creates nightmares, not because it chooses to, but because a human mind trapped so long within humming steel begins to fill the void with its own horrors. Dreams become dangerous, visions of doors slamming shut without warning, of shadowed figures in unlit hallways, of voices whispering over the comms that aren't part of any broadcast. Perhaps illusions caused by stress, or something else entirely. Because here is the detail the training officers omit: humans were never meant to live in the void. The body can endure it. The mind struggles. The soul, some say, does not endure at all. There are diaries scattered through history from officers, cooks, engineers, even commissars, describing the same eerie encounters. Machinery humming in patterns like communication. Lights flickering as though reacting to thoughts. Feelings of being watched in completely empty corridors. Some call it imagination, others call it trauma. A select few, those who speak far too quietly, call it the warp. And yet, the strangest part is this. If a recruit endures long enough, the ship begins to feel familiar. Predictable, almost alive. The same way a prison inmate knows the timing of guards' footsteps, a long-serving deckhand knows when the thrumming of the engines has fallen out of rhythm by the slightest fraction. When the lumen flickers not from age, but from warning. When the air tastes slightly different because the ship's filters are struggling. The warship becomes a companion, a jailer, a guardian, a predator. Most never notice the shift in their thinking, until they set foot on a planet again and feel the ground beneath their boots. The silence of soil, the absence of steel, the terrifying realization that the sky stretches farther than bulkheads ever allowed them to see. Many crew return planetside and feel exposed, vulnerable, lost, because the terrible truth is this: the ship that never sleeps trains its crew to fear what does. Inside an Imperial Navy warship, faith isn't a choice, or a comfort, or a philosophy. Faith is survival. The Emperor is not simply revered, he is oxygen, sustenance, justification, and judgment all at once. Every corridor, no matter how industrial, bears inscriptions praising his radiance. Vox systems broadcast litanies twice per sleep cycle, regardless of whether anyone is sleeping or working or praying. Even the engine rooms are treated as sanctified spaces, where tech priests chant Benaric hymns that echo like distorted machine choirs. If the engines fail, it is not merely a technical fault, it is interpreted as spiritual sabotage or divine displeasure. Aboard the ship, belief becomes mechanical. Recruits recite prayers before operating equipment. Navigators whisper blessings before peering into the madness of the warp. Even cooks mutter devotions over vats of ration paste, not in hope the food will taste better, but that no unseen contamination steals more lives than starvation ever could. The commissariat enforces doctrine with eyes as sharp as bayonets. Their presence is quiet but heavy. They do not shout. They do not warn twice. A faltering voice during a prayer is noticed. A missing pendant of the Aquila is recorded. A failed response during a catechism is remembered. Do it twice, and the ship may never see you again. Yet the most haunting part is how devotion slowly intertwines with fear until no one can tell them apart. Crew members pray not just for protection, but to protect themselves from their own thoughts. Doubt on a warship is a contagious plague. Rumors spread faster than vent-borne mold, and suspicion spreads faster still. Some crew cling to faith to stay sane. Others cling to it because they have nothing else left. And some, in the deepest recesses of the ship, cling to faith because they swear they have seen things that could not be explained by physics, logic, or sobriety. Shapes moving in corridors where no one has clearance. Shadows bending around corners with no source. Voices that offer comfort or warning when no one stands behind you. The chaplains say such moments are tests. Trials of loyalty. Proof that the Emperor watches his children even in the darkest void. But not all believe these whispers come from him. There are places aboard the ship where hymns echo strangely, lingering too long, overlapping with themselves. Sections sealed for thousands of years are rumored to still have chanting behind them, soft and distant, like prayers for a congregation that no longer exists. These rumors are not printed. They are breathed, passed along in mess halls when the lights dim. Sworn to be true by crew members with hollow eyes and steady voices. Men and women who no longer sleep deeply, for fear of what waits behind closed lids. Because in the black gulf of space, belief is not simply commanded, it becomes a shield against the unknown. Against the void. Against the threat that lurks not only outside the hull, but perhaps within it. Faith aboard an Imperial warship is not about salvation. It is about survival, of the body, and of the mind. That is life aboard an Imperial Navy warship. The chain of command isn't just structure, it is law, faith, identity, and sentence. To defy it is to vanish. To misunderstand it is to suffer. To survive it is to obey. At the top stands the Lord Admiral or Captain, a figure more myth than mortal to most of the crew. Most will never see their commanding officer with their own eyes. Orders arrive through intermediaries, filtered through ranks like scripture descending from a mountain carved of fire and steel. To the lowest deckhands, the captain may as well be the Emperor himself, distant, omniscient, unquestionable. Below them, officers operate like an iron spine, their authority reinforced by decades of indoctrination and the ever-present threat of the commissariat. Officers are not cruel by accident, the ship makes them that way. Keeping thousands disciplined in an environment where panic or hesitation could kill everyone requires more than strategy, it requires fear. Not the wild, chaotic fear of prey, but the sharp, controlled fear of soldiers who know their fate lies in the hands of those who command them. Mid-ranking leaders, lieutenants, sergeants, overseers, walk a constant tightrope. They are close enough to the crew to understand their misery, yet too bound to the system to show sympathy. Many once promised themselves they would lead differently. Most fail. A warship does not reward compassion. Compassion leads to hesitation, and hesitation leads to corpses. At the bottom are the deckhands, the loaders, the cleaners, the cooks, the scribes, the laborers, the ones who breathe the ship's fumes and clean its rust with bare hands. They are the veins that carry its lifeblood. The forgotten masses who keep the behemoth afloat while receiving none of the glory. Their reward for obedience is survival. Their punishment for failure is an unmarked death reported as necessary loss. What makes the chain of command so effective, and so devastating, is that it is deeply internalized. Over time, recruits stop thinking in terms of fairness or reason. Orders are not followed because they make sense, orders are followed because they are orders. On a vessel with cannons large enough to reduce cities to glass, morality becomes a luxury no one can afford. And yet, there is an unspoken truth that everyone, even the highest-ranking officer, understands. The ship itself is the true commander. If the engines stutter, the entire hierarchy bends in fear. If a plasma coil ruptures, rank does not shield flesh from fire. If a warp storm rises, no metal protects the mind from unraveling. In the void, humans may command each other. But the ship commands all. It dictates when they breathe, where they stand, how they sleep, when they die. The officers may enforce its rules, but they are bound by them just as tightly as the lowest laborer. A malfunction in life support cares little for prestige. A hull breach respects no authority. And on nights when the deck trembles differently, when the lights flicker in patterns that resemble Morse code no one remembers learning, when footsteps echo after the corridor falls empty, officers and deckhands alike hold their breath. Because no matter how harsh the chain of command becomes, there is something else aboard that everyone fears more than their superiors. The unknown that shares the ship with them. Imperial Navy warships are not freshly forged titans of shining metal. They are relics older than empires, older than recorded memory, older, in some chilling cases, than humanity's understanding of its own past. Crews do not simply serve aboard these ships. They inherit their ghosts. Every Imperial warship has a history stained into its foundations. Decks that saw mutiny centuries before your birth. Corridors that once held prisoners whose names were erased, but whose final screams were said to cling to the air. Sealed bulkheads welded shut not for maintenance or containment, but because those who entered never came out, and those who commanded decided it was safer to bury whatever remained inside. New recruits often scoff at the idea of a haunted ship, dismissing such talk as superstition. The first sign is rarely dramatic, a door that opens by itself, though it should take 3 men to force it. A service light that glows in a corridor that hasn't been powered in decades. A whisper in the comms when the channel is officially silent. The senior crew do not laugh. They know better. They know the ship has memories. Some claim the ship learns its new arrivals, the ones who fear the dark, the ones who fear loneliness, the ones who fear the silence after lights out. They say the vessel responds differently to each soul. A paranoid laborer might swear the lights dim only when he walks alone. A navigator may wake to find her bunk sheets carefully folded at her feet, though she never left her bed. A mechanic may hear knocking from inside a fuel pipe, rhythmic, patient, as if something in the walls is asking to be let out. Not every horror is spectral. Some are far more real. Old ships have old scars. Radiation pockets that weren't mapped correctly. Contaminated water lines that poison slowly. Lethal depressurization points that engineers swear they just repaired. Documents say one thing, the ship does another. Sometimes, after a section accident kills a handful of crew, the ship seals the bulkhead, as protocol dictates, and then never opens it again. Security orders filed. Case closed. No rescues attempted. No retrievals performed. Future maps mark it simply, access restricted. Yet the ship is not empty beyond those seals. The vents still lead there. The pipes still feed through. And on quiet shifts, those stationed nearby claim they hear something tapping, faint and distant but deliberate. Like a code, like a signal, like someone, or something, trying to remember the way out. Most chalk it up to the ship settling, expanding, or cooling. Others claim it's rodents or mechanical pests. But everyone knows rodents don't whisper, and they certainly don't whisper names. There is a phrase among the oldest deckhands. This ship has more crew than the roster admits. They don't elaborate. They don't need to. Because sooner or later, someone new will be working a late shift, tightening a panel or logging an inspection, when they'll hear footsteps approach behind them, heavy, purposeful, armored. A shadow stretches across the floor. They turn, expecting an officer. But the corridor is empty. No officer. No footsteps. No armor. Just the echo of something that walked past, and never truly left. And perhaps the most terrifying part is this. Those who survive long enough stop fearing the noises, and start fearing the silence between them. Life aboard an Imperial Navy warship changes the body and breaks the habits of the civilian world, but it is the warp that breaks the mind. The ship may be steel and machine, but its shadow stretches through a realm where logic, physics, time, and sanity bleed like wounded beasts. For most civilians, even for planetary soldiers, the warp is a word, a concept, an abstract horror mentioned in cautionary sermons. But aboard a warship, the warp is not myth. It is a destination, a doorway, a frontier so hostile that the human soul feels its presence long before the ship pierces the veil. 2 cycles before transitioning, the air changes, not physically, but perceptually. Lights flicker without failing, as though momentarily uncertain of their own purpose. Machinery hum deepens by a tone no engineer acknowledges. Animals, if any are aboard, grow restless and silent. Dreams become vivid enough to leave bruises on waking skin, though no one touched the sleeper. Veterans say the warp senses the ship before the ship senses the warp. And when the vessel commits, when the Geller field is invoked and reality itself shudders, every crew member feels it. Not sees, not hears, feels. Like the moment before a scream. Like the breath held before a plunge into freezing water. A ship transitioning into the warp does not travel, it disappears. Inside the sealed chambers, the navigators take their place, beings both feared and revered, born with eyes that should not exist and vision that no mortal is meant to endure. They gaze into the storm of unreality and steer through nightmares made of raw, screaming possibility. Some whisper that navigators do not simply guide the ship, they bargain with the darkness. The rest of the crew, they cling to faith and routine. Messes remain open, work continues, hymns echo more loudly. No one stops, because stopping means listening. And listening means noticing the faint scraping beyond the bulkhead that wasn't there yesterday, or the distant moan that sounds like metal but somehow feels like words. Some say the warp knocks. Softly at first, politely, even, as though asking permission to enter. That is why the Geller field exists, not as technology but as salvation. A bubble of sustained reality forced upon the impossible. A candle in an endless storm. But even candles flicker. Malfunctions are rare, but rare means nothing in the void. Just one moment of interference, one surge, one misalignment, and the ship hears the warp answer back. There are logs, restricted, buried, classified, of crews who heard voices during transit. Voices offering comfort. Voices mimicking loved ones lost. Voices whispering deeply personal secrets no one alive could know. The warp does not communicate. It imitates. It seduces with familiarity. It lies with affection. And those who answer, those who speak back, even in a whisper, even by accident, they don't always vanish immediately. Sometimes, they change first. Sometimes, they smile when others are afraid. Sometimes, they dream of doorways where none exist. Sometimes, they stand by sealed windows and speak softly to the darkness outside, as though reporting progress. The commissariat records such cases as psychological stress. Medical officers list them as chemical imbalance. Chaplains call them spiritual battles. But the oldest crew members, the ones with hollow eyes and steady hands, use another word. Marked. Because no human truly survives the warp untouched. They survive only unclaimed. Transition ends with a violent lurch, a jolt that rattles bones and machinery alike. The ship emerges gasping back into real space, like a drowning soul tearing free from black waters. Some collapse in prayer, others in sweat, a few in tears, but all share the same question they cannot afford to ask aloud. Did something follow us back? But here's where things turn truly disturbing. The asylums of Warhammer 40K don't simply house the broken. Many of them are designed to break you on purpose. In a galaxy where psychic powers are as real as bullets, the mind becomes both a weapon and a weakness. If a human suddenly manifests psychic abilities, even accidentally, their consciousness becomes a doorway, and something from the warp might eagerly walk through. Imagine waking up with a headache so painful it feels like your skull is cracking, only to learn that the voices whispering your name aren't hallucinations, they're invitations. Some patients aren't mentally ill at all, they're untested psychers waiting to be sorted, trained, or sentenced to death. The Imperium doesn't care if you're innocent. The Imperium cares if you're useful. And if you're not, your records vanish, your existence becomes a rumor. You simply become another forgotten room number in a concrete nightmare. Inside these facilities, the line between treatment and torment is so thin it may as well not exist. Restraint chairs wired for compliance. Soundproof cells designed for centuries-old screams. Doctors who fear their patients more than their superiors, because in 40K, a mistake doesn't cost your job. It costs your soul. Even worse, some facilities don't focus on stopping psychic madness, they experiment with it. They poke the warp with scalpels and electrodes, hoping to create a weapon. Most subjects don't survive the process. The ones that do don't survive themselves. Not every patient screams. Not every patient cries. Some simply sit in silence, smiling, waiting for something only they can hear. On an Imperial Navy warship, that is the reality. The warship is not a home, not a workplace, not a school. It is a machine that consumes time as ruthlessly as it consumes resources, and it expects its crew to feed it without question. To live aboard is to enter an eternal loop where every action is both necessary and meaningless, every decision dictated by procedure, every thought corralled into obedience. The grind begins at dawn, though dawn is meaningless, for the sun never rises aboard the void-bound vessel. It is the beginning of a cycle already set into motion centuries before the youngest recruit was born. Tasks repeat endlessly, machinery checks, rations distributed, bulkhead inspections, engine calibrations. Every crew member moves like a cog in a massive clock, each motion precise, predictable, and exhausting. Failure is not tolerated. Even minor errors are recorded, reported, and punished quietly, efficiently. But the most insidious part of the grind is psychological. Humans are not meant to live in a place where the hours blend into one another, where walls and corridors never change, and where the same sound, the constant hum of engines, the low vibration of machinery, never stops. Days and nights lose meaning. Names lose meaning. Faces blur. The ship becomes the only reality, and the crew gradually merge with it, indistinguishable from the corridors, the pipes, the humming machinery. And yet, despite this monotony, the human mind finds ways to fight back. Small acts of rebellion emerge, tiny sparks in the infinite darkness, a whispered joke in the mess hall, a secret mark carved into a bulkhead, a contraband trinket hidden under a bunk. These small victories are precious because they remind the crew that they are not completely consumed by the ship. They are reminders of life beyond metal. But such sparks are fragile. Any attention from superiors, or worse, from the commissariat, snuffs them out instantly. The ship is merciless. It rewards conformity, punishes individuality, and respects endurance above all else. To survive, a crew member must adopt the rhythm of the vessel, internalize its cold logic, and allow personal desires to die quietly in the back of the mind. And still, through the endless cycle, there exists an unspoken promise. If one endures long enough, if one follows every order without hesitation, if one prays and works and breathes in time with the machine, there is reward. Not luxury, not glory, not freedom, but a moment of understanding. A fleeting awareness that, for all its cruelty and indifference, the warship has made you part of something larger than yourself, something eternal, vast, and terrifyingly alive. This is the paradox of life aboard an Imperial Navy warship. Absolute oppression coexists with unparalleled significance. The longer you endure, the more the vessel claims you, shapes you, and, in its own way, respects you. But it will never love you. And it will never release you. Life aboard an Imperial Navy warship is designed to grind the spirit, but even here, small sparks of humanity persist, fleeting, fragile, but powerful enough to remind the crew that they are more than cogs in the machine. In the darkest corridors, crew members steal brief conversations during maintenance shifts, exchanging whispered jokes or memories of worlds they'll likely never see again. A shared laugh over recycled rations, a quiet nod of recognition after a long day, or a small act of kindness, an extra portion of food, a repaired suit of armor left without credit, becomes a rebellion against the monotony imposed by the vessel. Friendship aboard these ships is rare, and yet when it forms, it is intense. Trust becomes sacred because betrayal can mean death. Allies are cherished quietly, and loyalty is expressed subtly, often in ways the ship itself cannot monitor. Some sailors write letters to each other on scraps of paper and hide them in vents. Others pass encrypted messages through old communication systems, a dangerous game that brings warmth in a world of cold metal. Romance, though fleeting, exists in hushed corners. A touch of a hand on a railing, a glance that lingers too long before lights flicker, a whispered, "Be safe," in the middle of a routine check. These small moments of connection provide an emotional anchor, however temporary, against the relentless erosion of the self. Even personal rituals, simple and secret, can keep a soul tethered to their humanity. A deckhand might polish a favorite piece of equipment longer than necessary, humming a tune from their home world. An engineer may sneak a tiny trinket from a previous posting into their quarters, a reminder that life existed outside the steel. But these glimpses are always precarious. The ship punishes indulgence subtly. A misstep during a duty cycle, a reprimand from a mid-ranking officer, or even the casual observation that a person has lingered too long in one place. The reward of human connection comes at a constant risk. Yet, for those who persist, these tiny sparks of life, laughter, touch, memory, become more than comfort. They are resistance. Resistance to total assimilation by the warship. Resistance to losing oneself completely in the grind. Resistance to the terrifying knowledge that, in the void, the only thing that might survive the centuries of service is the cold, unfeeling machine itself. The crew lives in cycles of fear and duty, yet these fragments of shared experience, rare, fragile, and dangerous, are what make survival bearable. They remind the sailors, even briefly, that they are human. And that humanity, no matter how battered, can still endure even the most unyielding of machines. This is the final truth of life aboard an Imperial Navy warship. Survival is not measured in victories or medals, but in endurance. The ship does not reward the brave, the clever, or the talented. It respects only those who endure, who breathe, obey, and persist despite the relentless erosion of mind and body. By this stage, the crew has been shaped entirely by the ship. They know the routines by instinct, the dangers by intuition, and the silences by memory. Every corridor, every bulkhead, every humming engine has become part of them. To leave the ship, if such a thing were even possible, would feel like severing a limb, or worse, forgetting an entire lifetime. The vessel is more than steel. It is a living chronicle, a master of existence, and a prison that shapes identity itself. Endurance comes at a cost. Sleep remains shallow. Faith becomes ritualized, a shield against a void that offers no mercy. Isolation and monotony sharpen the mind in some ways, dull it in others. But the crew adapts. They learn to carry fear quietly, to act mechanically while thinking abstractly, to pray with eyes open while watching the machinery hum its eternal cadence. They survive by merging with the ship's rhythm until the distinction between self and vessel becomes almost irrelevant. And yet, in rare, fleeting moments, the galaxy beyond the hull reminds them why they endure. A glimpse of distant stars through a viewport, a pulse of warp energy felt in the bones, the fleeting memory of homeworld soil or a loved one's voice, these tiny fragments of beauty pierce the suffocating monotony. They remind the crew that though the ship consumes time, space, and identity, it cannot completely erase memory, resilience, or the spark of humanity. Ultimately, Life aboard an Imperial Navy warship is not heroic. It is not glamorous. It is relentless, punishing, and unforgiving. Yet it forges a strange perfection. Humans shaped to withstand the impossible, minds disciplined to obey the inexorable, and souls tethered, however tenuously, to hope. It is a life defined not by freedom, but by survival. Not by comfort, but by endurance. And for those who endure long enough, the void itself begins to feel less alien, less like an enemy, and more like a companion that will carry them, one endless cycle at a time. And so, the cycle continues. The ship hums. The engines pulse. The lights flicker in a rhythm as old as humanity's reach into the stars. The crew marches, prays, works, and survives. All the while knowing that to live here is to endure, and to endure is to be remembered, if only by the ship itself.